You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Happy Friday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to my show. This is the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over and see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio, and at the same time, come on over and see my YouTube channel where this broadcast is being simulcast in video, and you can join the live chat room with the other Intrepids over at youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And you can also check out the archives there. I've got every show we've ever done on Odyssey Radio over the almost last year. 11 months we've been going with Odyssey Radio, 5 nights a week. And so you can do the math, but there's about 230 shows in archive that you can go listen to. You can also view the old chat rooms. You cannot contribute to the chat rooms because they're all recorded live with the video. But you can make comment down below the video. So come on over, check it out. And we're going to continue on with our series tonight. But before we do, I want to mention something. Yesterday on Rocky's show, The Situation Room, we were talking about music. And Rocky asked me what kind of music I like. I am not one who is into overtly upbeat music, meaning high tempo, fast tempo, and so on. There's a few things that get my fire lit, but I tend to be a more contemplative man. I have said many times I'm a contemplative, soft-spoken man with hard opinions, but a soft interior. And that's the kind of music that appeals to me. I like music that will evoke emotion in me, not just physical movement. I've never been one to go out on the dance floor and shake my booty. It's just not something I've ever really done that much of. The kind of movement I like is different than dance movement. Although, choreography when we're doing a sword fight or something, that's different, of course, than choreography doing a dance. And so I've never had a problem with movement, just I don't shake my butt around the floor. That's not the kind of music I've liked. I've always liked something that means something to me, that has a deeper edge to it, a deeper spirituality, if you will. There is a conversation I had on Facebook with a good friend of mine who has gone through some pretty devastating trials over the last couple of years. It's a good friend of mine who was accused of rape, which he did not do. Everybody says, well, you never know what's in the private heart of a person. Well, yeah, there are some people you do. You know them well enough to say that is not within his capabilities to perform such non-consensual violent acts. And, of course, this rape was not something... I'm not even going to get into the details. Suffice it to say, he was accused, he was charged, and he's been going the last couple of years back and forth legally. He has good counsel. He's going to come out on top of this case. He's going to win this case, but he still has to deal with it. What it did do in the process was it shut down everything that he was. He lost his business. He lost clients. He was somebody who is a writer. He's an intellectual. I would put him in that intellectual camp. The same local newspaper in Minneapolis that had written several articles on him over the years for his work and his thinking and his critical thinking came out when this happened, and of course put on the front page his mugshots being arrested for rape. And so, and it was the most ridiculous display I've ever seen. All that aside, he talks with me from time to time on things, the way I felt back when this all started and so on and so forth. And he spent a night or two in jail while they were doing the booking and all of that. I think it was over a weekend. And so it ended up being 2 days. And he's fighting this, and there is no truth to the charge. Therefore, he will come out victorious, and he knows it. all of that to say, he posted something about music on his Facebook page, and we discuss music every now and then. And he said, those close to me know how curious I am about music. Not so long ago, I was deep into traditional country music, American folk music, and many ethnic grooves. I have a ton of music with lyrics I don't understand because they're written in Cushitic or Arabic or French or Norwegian. And while my love affair with classical music shows no signs of abating, I took a break from it the past few days to jump into contemporary Christian or praise and gospel music. It started because I'd noted that Dolly Parton was on the pop Christian music chart with a new duet with a CCM artist I'd never heard of, Zach Williams. Williams is a good pop voice, and two of them made the song work if that's your thing. I admire Dolly Parton, and at 74 she can still bring it. I dove into more and more of this music and read culturally critical commentaries coming from inside contemporary Christian institution. Hymnals are out, and worship and praise music is the thing. And I will interject here. When I was in church, when I was a youth pastor, we did a lot of praise music. And many people believe, he goes on, that praise music is too worldly, and it evokes the kind of gyrating paroxysms that make more traditional church folk nervous. That made me laugh a bit. It's a world unto itself, and it seems so far from where I live, but I know people who have found strength through this genre, so I'm not condemning. I understand why CCM is growing in popularity, though I don't find the lyrics to these songs to be philosophically compelling. I sure can understand why, with all the ugly in the world, some might find these themes comforting and encouraging. And then he posts the song that Dolly Parton and Zach Williams did together. And we were talking underneath his thread, and I had mentioned him back in my days as a youth pastor, was deep into the CCM thing, the contemporary Christian music thing, for obvious reasons. And my favorite singer-songwriter was Michael Card, a good musician, phenomenal lyricist, and intellectual. And my friend came back and said, I have a hard time bridging CCM with intellectual, but that's my bias. And I said, that's what made his work unique to me. And he came back and he said, interesting for me is to supplant Buddha with Jesus. And they're so similar. As an example, this song, and he posted a link to a song, struck me because this describes the path of the Dharma as well, though cloaked in the language of modern Christian music. And one of the main lines in the song, this might even be the title, I'm no longer a slave to fear. And I went and listened to this song. I hadn't heard it before. And you can tell right away, you guys know me by now, my passions, my emotions are under the surface. I don't wear them on my sleeve, but I also don't conceal them. If something is moving to me, I allow myself to be moved. And even if it's in public or on the radio, we laugh and joke about it a lot. I cry at things. I cry at Disney cartoons with my kids because they're made to evoke those emotions. I also, and I cry at certain musics. They tap into things for me. And he said, they are not an exact fit, but the threads are so very similar to the Buddha Dharma. In the time after I was incarcerated, and he's talking about a couple of days that he spent over this whole false rape charge, he said, I struggled with such existential fear and a loss in faith in nearly everything and everyone. In sitting with the Dharma, in meditation, I recognized how much like a slave I'd become to those fears. And he says, I just found some of the sentiments here, trite as they may seem, a reminder of where I was. And I listened to the song, and I told him, I said, this song taps that deliberately repressed spirituality deep down inside of me. And I understand what you mean. And for me, I can come into doing my radio show talking about these historical events with Native America, and the subjugation of the American people, the conquering of the American West. And there are elements in that will tap into that deep spirituality or that deep emotion. And sometimes I struggle to fight back the tears because there's a thought that's expressed that taps into something. And it's happened several times through this series. Sometimes noticeable to you, probably sometimes not. If you're listening audibly, you can't always hear that in my voice. If you're watching the video, you can see it. You can see the tears will well up, or the emotion chokes me up a little bit. And I work to push that down a bit because that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to blubber through every radio show about things that are emotionally disturbing or emotionally tapping. Yet today, and the reason I bring this up is I'm coming into this show today already emotionally tapped by some of the music I was listening to. And I posted the song on my Facebook, if you want to go listen to it. Zach Williams' No Longer Slaves is the name of the song. And he just starts with, I'm no longer a slave to fear. He says, for I'm a child of God. And he doesn't get too deep into evangelical Christianity, even though it's contemporary Christian music, but he taps into that thing that we all have, that recognition that through all the crap and all the trappings put on everything, there is something at the core that is real. When I talked several months back, for several months, about ancient Christianity, about the mystery religions, about, as some put it, indoctrination and becoming unindoctrinated from issues of certain particular denominational faiths, of being inculcated into that thinking and trying to decouple yourself from that can leave you sometimes feeling a bit bereft, a bit empty, a bit, okay, I've decoupled from this thing because I recognize the indoctrination, the inculcation, and yet it's freeing to be free from that, but at the same time, it leaves you a bit floundering. Like, okay, this is what I've believed for so long. Where do I go with this now? And so for me, I tended to, and still tend to, repress those things. I push them down deliberately. And there's this dichotomy in me. There are times I find that I am very much anti-Christianity, anti-God, anti-Bible, things like that, as far as theology goes. And I will find myself kind of fighting against it. But if I run into an argument where somebody is degrading the Bible or degrading the faith of the Bible, I will find myself defending it. And so I've got that dichotomy going on, saying there is a real belief deep down inside, yet I want to do away with the trappings of it, the falsity of it, the indoctrination, the inculcation of it into my life. And so that's why I listened to this song this morning. I'm no longer a slave to fear, but I am a child of God. And if you go listen to that at any time, Zach Williams is the singer-songwriter. No Longer Slaves is the name of the song. And the video that I put up is one of him where he performed this live at a prison. And you see a lot of these inmates are singing the song along with him in the shots of the audience. And they're inmates. They're hardened criminals. And these guys are saying, I'm no longer a slave to my fears. So what these individuals did to get themselves into prison, I do not know, nor does it matter for the sake of that video. But it was looking at people who said, I need to decouple from my fears. And I need to reattach to who I believe God is. And as my friends said, you can take Christian or Christianity or Jesus and replace it with Buddha or the Dharma or whatever, and it makes sense. And so this is something that I come into the show tonight. I know where I'm going with the story that we're picking up, but I don't know what might be tapped in there. As I told my friend, this deep inner spirituality is tapped so simply by a song like that makes me recognize that I'm not a slave to my fears. And so if you want to take any message out of that, I encourage you to, go listen to the song if you want to, if that's your thing. Look it up. At the same time, think of how it affects you. And it's not the just being affected emotionally that's the key. It's the understanding why it affects me on that emotional level. Is it, some might say from my old circles of faith, well, that's God tapping on your heart. Others might say that's the recognition that you know there is something there that you've been pushing away from. And it's the idea of saying, I've said before, I lost my faith a very long time ago. That does not mean I've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And so these things can be ignited in you. They can bring emotions to the surface. And what I find is when this kind of thing happens to me, something as simple as a song, it can last all day. And it doesn't take much for me, a turn of the head, and I can find tears well up because I think of that concept of not being a slave to fear. I think of that concept of knowing that there is something greater than me out there. And that's why, so I'm preparing you. Tonight may go just fine, just swimmingly, just as smooth as silk, and we're going to talk about history and these events. At the same time, I can't be held overtly responsible for the emotion it might dredge up. Now, that's not really what this was all about, but that was in my mind when I entered speaking about this. So, think about the things that hit you this way. What is it in your daily walk in life that hits you in a way that it taps and cracks open maybe a shell or a wall that you've put around something, and that will eke out a little bit all day, all week maybe. And so think about what does that for you. So if I were to reapproach Rocky's question during our show yesterday, what kind of music do I like? I like the music that taps into my soul, that makes me think, that makes me feel. I don't always manifest that in physical dance form, but it does come out in other ways. So there you go. Having said all that, happy Friday, folks. It's Friday. It's the end of the week. There's no show tomorrow, of course. Saturday's my day off. Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, 10 a.m. out east, 7 a.m. out on the West Coast. We do It's Sunday, kind of our own little version of church without it being churchified on Sunday morning. And it's live. It's not broadcast on Odyssey Radio. So it's a live YouTube stream over here on my YouTube channel. Come on over and check it out if you haven't yet. And for tonight, let's get into where we left off last night. We were talking about why did I just go blank? Red Cloud's War. And the way the Army, the U.S. government, is closing in and consolidating all these plains tribes and woodland tribes that were former woodland tribes into this area in the Powder River country, which is up by Fort Laramie, which now today would be parts of Nebraska. We went through Colorado with Black Kettle a few days ago. But Colorado into the Dakotas, into Wyoming and Montana, this is the region that this is taking place. And remember, yesterday we left off with on November 9th of 1867, the peace commissioners all arrived at Fort Laramie. And they found only a few Crow chiefs waiting to meet them. and the Crow were friendly. And there was nobody from the Arapaho, nobody from the Cheyenne. And they were friendly, but one of them, Beartooth, made a surprising speech at this peace commission. And this was on November 9th of 1867. And this is where we ended last night, and we'll start with it tonight. He said, "Fathers, fathers, fathers, hear me well. Call back your young men from the mountains of the bighorn sheep. They have run over our country. They have destroyed the growing wood and the green grass. They have set fire to our lands. Fathers, your young men have devastated my country and killed my animals, the elk, the deer, the antelope, my buffalo. They do not kill to eat them. They leave them to rot where they fall." It's game hunting. Fathers, if I went into your country to kill your animals, what would you say? Should I not be wrong? And would you not make war on me? And now, a few days after the commissioner's meeting with the Crow, messengers arrived from Red Cloud. Now, he would come to Laramie to talk peace with the commission, and he informed the commissioners as soon as the soldiers were withdrawn from the forts on the Powder River Road. The war, he repeated, was being fought for one purpose: to save the Valley of the Powder, the only hunting ground left his nation, and from intrusion by white men. And the Great Father sent his soldiers out here to spill blood, he said. I did not first commence the spilling of blood. If the Great Father kept white men out of my country, peace would last forever, said Red Cloud. But if they disturb me, there will be no peace. The Great Spirit raised me in this land and has raised you in another land. What I have said, I mean. I mean to keep this land. That was what Red Cloud, and this was read in the U.S. Congress, the 40th Congress, and it's a House executive document. And so, for the third time in 2 years, a peace commission had failed. But before the commissioners returned to Washington, however, they sent Red Cloud a shipment of tobacco with other pleas to come to Laramie as soon as the winter snows melted in the spring. Now, Red Cloud politely replied that he had received the tobacco of peace and would smoke it, and that he would come to Laramie as soon as the soldiers left his country. Saying, thanks for the tobacco, but you still have to get the soldiers out. And in the spring of 1868, the great warrior Sherman and the same peace commission returned to Fort Laramie. Now we're up into 1868, springtime. And this time they had firm orders from an impatient government to abandon the forts on the Powder River Road and obtain a peace treaty with Red Cloud. They were under orders to abandon these forts. Give Red Cloud what he wants. And this time they sent a special agent from the Indian Bureau to personally invite the Oglala leader to a peace signing. Now, Red Cloud told the agent that he was going to need about 10 days to consult with his allies and would probably come to Laramie during May, the moon when the ponies shed. Now, only a few days after the agent returned to Laramie, however, a message arrived from Red Cloud, stating, "We're on the mountains looking down on the soldiers in the forts. When we see the soldiers moving away and the forts abandoned, then I'll come down and talk." And this was all very humiliating and embarrassing to the great warrior Sherman and the commissioners. They managed to obtain the signatures of a few minor chiefs who came in for presents, but as the days passed, the frustrated commissioners quietly departed one by one for the east. And by late spring, only Black Whiskers Sanborn and White Whiskers Harney were left to negotiate, but Red Cloud and his allies remained on the Powder through the summer, keeping a close watch on the forts and the road to Montana. And at last, the reluctant War Department issued orders for abandonment of the Powder River country. On July 29th, the troops at Fort C.F. Smith packed their gear and started marching southward. Early the next morning, Red Cloud led a band of celebrating warriors into the post, and they set fire to every building. A month later, Fort Kearny, Phil Kearny, was abandoned. and the honor of burning was given to the Cheyenne under Little Wolf. A few days after that, the last soldier departed from Fort Reno, and the Powder River Road was officially closed. Red Cloud had held out. He was getting what he asked for. After 2 years of resistance, Red Cloud had won his
Go to ScottAlanRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, AlanRoberts.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
All right, folks, welcome back from that break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my program, the Intrepid Radio Program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. And you can come over and watch the simulcast and join the live chat with the other Intrep heads over at my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. Pardon my long-windedness. I had to cut very short at the end of the last segment. I sometimes forget to look at the clock and see where I am. So let's pick up right where we left off. Remember I said the War Department, reluctant, issued orders for abandonment of the Powder River country, and all the forts were emptied out. And Red Cloud had won his war. And for a few more weeks he kept the treaty makers waiting, and then on November 6th of 1868, he came riding into Fort Laramie, now a conquering hero, and he would sign the treaty. He said, "From this day forward, all war between the parties to this agreement shall cease forever. The government of the United States desires peace, and its honor is hereby pledged to keep it." This was the wording of the treaty, not Red Cloud. "And the Indians desire peace, and they now pledge their honor to maintain it." For the next 20 years, however, the contents of the other 16 articles of that treaty of 1868 would remain a matter of dispute between the Indians and the government of the United States. What many of the chiefs understood was in the treaty, and what was actually written therein after Congress ratified it, were like two horses whose colorations did not match, as it was said. Spotted Tail, 9 years later, said, "These promises have not been kept. All the words have proved to be false. There was a treaty made by General Sherman, General Sanborn, and General Harney. At that time, the general told us we should have annuities and goods from that treaty for 35 years. He said this, but yet he didn't tell the truth." Now, these annuities, by the way, were governmental payments for their land that they had taken. Now, there was the Sundance chant that the Indians went into. It says, "Look at that young man. He is feeling good because his sweetheart is watching him." Now, we're going to enter another section here where we're going to talk about this quote of General Sheridan's, where he said, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian." This is the attitude that was taken up after this treaty was signed in 1868 and not adhered to. So let's look at some history from 1868. In February, the U.S. House of Representatives resolved to impeach President Johnson. That's a Lincoln successor. March 5th, the Senate convenes as a court of impeachment. President Johnson is summoned to appear. On May 22nd, the world's first robbery of a railroad train occurs in Indiana. May 26th, the Senate fails to convict President Johnson. July 28th, 14th Amendment, equal rights to all except Indians. This becomes a part of the U.S. Constitution. In July 25th, Congress organizes the Wyoming Territory out of parts of Dakota, Utah, and Idaho. On October 11th, Thomas Edison patents his first invention, the electrical vote recorder. November 3rd, Ulysses S. Grant was elected president. December 1st, John D. Rockefeller begins relentless war on competitors in the oil business. These are some of the things that are going on this year, 1868, when this treaty was signed. Then, Totakanska, Tall Bull, said this to General Winfield Scott Hancock. He said, "We never did the white man any harm. We didn't intend to. We're willing to be friends with the white man. The buffalo are diminishing fast. The antelope that were plenty a few years ago, they're now thin. When they shall all die, we shall all be hungry. We shall want something to eat, and will be compelled to come into the fort. Your young men must not fire at us. Whenever they see us, they fire, and we fire back on them." Wiquini, or Roman Nose, said this to the same general, General Winfield Scott Hancock. "Are not women and children more timid than men? The Cheyenne warriors are not afraid, but you have never heard of Sand Creek? Your soldiers look just like those who butchered the women and children there." And then Motivato, Black Kettle, to the Indians at Medicine Creek Lodge, he said, "We were once friends with the whites, but you nudged us out of the way by your intrigues, and now when we are in council, you keep nudging each other. Why don't you talk and go straight, and let all be well?" In the spring of 1866, as Red Cloud was preparing to fight for the Powder River country, a considerable number of homesick Southern Cheyenne who had been with him decided to go south for the summer. They wanted to hunt buffalo again along their beloved Smoky Hill and hoped to see some of their old friends and relatives who had gone with Black Kettle below the Arkansas River. Now among them were Tall Bull, White Horse, Graybeard, Bull Bear, and other Dog Soldier chiefs. The great war leader, Roman Nose, also went along, and so did the two half-breed Bent brothers. And in the valley of the Smoky Hill, they found several bands of young Cheyenne and Arapaho who had slipped away from the camps of Black Kettle and Little Raven below the Arkansas, they had come into Kansas to hunt against the wishes of their chiefs, who by signing the Treaty of 1865 a year earlier had given up tribal rights to their old hunting grounds. Roman Nose and the Dog Soldier chiefs scoffed at the treaty. None of them had signed it, and none accepted it. Fresh from the freedom and independence of the Powder River country, they had no use for chiefs who signed away tribal lands. Now, not many of the returned exiles went on south to visit Black Kettle's people. Among the few who did was George Bent. He especially wanted to see Black Kettle's niece, Magpie, and not long after their reunion he made her his wife. And on rejoining Black Kettle, Bent discovered that the Southern Cheyenne's old friend Edward Wynkoop was now the agent for the tribe. Remember Wynkoop? And these were the happy days for us, George Bent said afterward. Black Kettle was a fine man and highly respected by all who knew him. And when the agent Wynkoop learned that the Dog Soldiers were hunting again on the Smoky Hill, he went to see the chiefs and tried to persuade them to sign the treaty and join Black Kettle. Now, they refused flatly. Said, nope, not signing anything, saying they would never leave their country again. Now, this is, if you've ever driven through, I was coming up from Texas with my family 2 summers ago, and we were driving back right at the end of the day as the sun was starting to set, and we were in Kansas. And astride the freeway on east and west, we were going straight north, was all this wide open land. I mean, it was eerie. Downright eerie. We're driving for a couple of hours north at, 80 miles an hour. So for 100 to 150 miles, it seemed, we were in this wide open territory in Kansas. And you, as far as your eye could see to the east and to the west, flat land. It wasn't all prairie, but very few buildings here and there. Other than that, it was this wide open space that we stopped at a wayside rest, and just to look and take some pictures at sunset. And the cold wind was blowing across, even though it was August, and it was downright palpable. This almost eerie feeling of peacefulness. There was nothing there. And this is the territory we're in now, where they went back to do their hunting. And that picture came up in my head. Now, the fresh from the freedom and the independence of the Powder River country, these Dog Soldiers had no use for chiefs who signed away their tribal lands. And they said, we're not moving. We're staying here. And Wynkoop warned them that soldiers would probably attack them if they stayed in Kansas. But they replied that they would live or die there. And the only promise they would give the agent was that they would hold their young men in check. We'll try not to fight. But this is our land. We want it back. And by late summer, the Dog Soldiers were hearing rumors of Red Cloud's successes against the soldiers in the Powder River country. If the Sioux and the Northern Cheyenne could fight a war to hold their country, then why should not the Southern Cheyenne and the Arapaho fight to hold their country between the Smoky Hill and the Republican? And with Roman Nose as a unifying leader, many bands came together, and the chiefs made plans to stop travel along the Smoky Hill Road. While the Cheyenne had been up north, a new stagecoach line had been opened up right through the heart of their best buffalo range. Chains of stations were springing up all along the Smoky Hill route, and the Indians agreed that these stations must be rubbed out if they hoped to stop the coaches and the wagon trains. Now, it was during this time that George and Charlie Bent came to a parting in their lives. George made up his mind to follow Black Kettle, but Charlie was an ardent disciple of Roman Nose. And then in October, during a meeting with their white father at Fort Zara, Charlie flew into a rage and accused his brother and father of betraying the Cheyenne. And after threatening to kill both of them, he had to be forcibly disarmed. Charlie rejoined the Dog Soldiers and led several raids against the stage stations, and in 1868 he was wounded, then contracted malaria as a result, and died in one of the Cheyenne camps. Now, late in the autumn of 1866, Roman Nose and a party of warriors visited Fort Wallace and notified the Overland Stage Company's agent that if he didn't stop running coaches through their country within 15 days, the Indians would begin attacking them. And so a series of early snowstorms, however, halted the travel before Roman Nose could begin his attacks, and the Dog Soldiers had to contend themselves with a few raids against livestock corrals at the stations. And faced with a long winter, the Dog Soldiers decided to make a permanent camp in the Big Timbers on the Republican River, and there they awaited the spring of 1867. So now you can see we're about a year back from the signing of the 1868 treaty up in the Powder River country. Now, to earn some money that winter, George Bent spent several weeks with the Kiowas trading for buffalo robes. When he returned to Black Kettle's village in the spring, he found everyone excited about rumors of a large force of bluecoats marching westward across the Kansas plains toward Fort Larned. Now, Black Kettle called this council and told his people that soldiers could mean nothing but trouble. Then he ordered them to pack up and move south toward the Canadian River. This was why messengers sent out by Agent Wynkoop didn't find Black Kettle until after the trouble, which the chief so accurately predicted had already started. Now, Wynkoop's runners did find most of the Dog Soldiers' leaders, and 14 of them agreed to come to Fort Larned and hear what General Winfield Scott Hancock had to say to them. Tall Bull, White Horse, Graybeard, and Bull Bear brought about 500 lodges down to Pawnee Creek, made a big camp there about 35 miles from Fort Larned, and then after a few days' delay caused by a snowstorm, rode on into the fort. And several of them wore the big blue array coats they had captured up north, and they could see that General Hancock didn't like this at all. He was wearing the same kind of coat with shoulder ornaments and shiny medals on it, and he received them in a haughty, blustery manner, letting them see the power of his 1,400 soldiers, now including the new 7th Cavalry, commanded by none other than Hard Backsides Custer. And after General Hancock had his artillerymen fire off some cannons for their benefit, they decided to name him Old Man of the Thunder. So this was Hancock's new name given by the Indians, Old Man of the Thunder. "I don't find many chiefs here," Hancock complained. "What is the reason? I have a great deal to say to the Indians, but I want to talk to them all together." Now listen to that cockiness. "Tomorrow I'm going to your camp." And the Cheyenne didn't like to hear this. Their women and children were back in the camp. Many of them were survivors of the horrors of Sand Creek and the massacre there, which happened 3 years before this. Would Hancock bring his 1,400 soldiers and his thundering guns down upon them again? The chiefs sat in silence, with the light of the campfire playing upon their grave faces, waiting for Hancock to continue. And he did. "I have heard that a great many Indians want to fight. Very well, you're here, and are come prepared for war. If you are for peace, you know the conditions. If you're for war, look out for the consequences." So he's being a hard-ass here. And so he told them then about the railroad. They had heard rumors of it, the iron track coming out past Fort Riley, heading straight for the Smoky Hill country. "The white man is coming out here so fast that nothing can stop him," Hancock boasted. "Coming from the east and coming from the west, like a prairie on fire in a high wind. Nothing can stop the whites. The reason for this is that the whites are a numerous people and they are spreading out. They require room and cannot help it. Those on one sea in the west wish to communicate with those living on another sea in the east. And that's the reason they're building these roads, these wagon roads and railroads and telegraphs. You must not let your young men stop them. You must keep your men off the roads. I have no more to say. I will await the end of your council to see whether you want war or peace. This is Winfield Scott Hancock's words to the Indian peace delegation. So Hancock sat down, his face expectant as the interpreter completed his last remark, but the Cheyenne remained silent, staring across the campfires at the general and his officers. At last Tall Bull lighted a pipe and exhaled smoke, passed it around the circle. He arose, folded his red and black blanket to free his right arm, and offered his hand to the old man of the thunder, to Hancock. "You sent for us," Tall Bull said. "We came here. We never did the white man any harm. We don't intend to. Our agent, Colonel Wincoop, told us to meet you here. Whenever you want to go to the Smoky Hill, you can go. You can go on any road you want. When we come on the road, your young men must not shoot us. We're willing to be friends with the white man. You say you're going to our village tomorrow? If you go, I shall have no more to say to you than here. I have said all I want to say." The old man of the thunder arose, put on his haughty manner again. "Why is Roman Nose not here?" he asked. The chiefs tried to tell him that although Roman Nose was a mighty warrior, he was not a chief, and only the chiefs had been invited to the council. "If Roman Nose will not come to me, I will go to see him," Hancock declared. "I will march my troops to your village tomorrow." As soon as the meeting broke up, Tall Bull went to Wincoop and begged him to stop the old man of the thunder from marching his soldiers to the Cheyenne camp. Tall Bull was afraid that if the Bluecoats came near the camp, there would be trouble between them and the hot-headed young dog soldiers, and he had every right to think that. So Wincoop agreed. Previous to General Hancock's departure, Wincoop said afterward, I expressed to him my fears of the result of his marching his troops immediately on to the Indian village, but notwithstanding, he persisted in doing so. Hancock's column consisted of cavalry, infantry, and artillery, and had as formidable an aspect, and presented as warlike an appearance as any that ever marched to meet an enemy on the battlefield. And so on this march toward the Pawnee Fork, some of the chiefs went ahead to warn the Cheyenne warriors that soldiers were coming. Others rode with Wincoop, who later said they exhibited in various ways their fear of the result of the expedition. Not fearful of their own lives or liberty, but fearful of the panic which they expected to be created amongst their women and children upon the arrival of the troops. Imagine what the Bluecoat armies represented to the Native American people by this point. And meanwhile, the Cheyenne camp had learned that the column of soldiers was coming. Messengers reported that the old man of the thunder was angry because Roman Nose had not come to see him at the fort. Roman Nose was flattered, but neither he nor Pawnee Killer, whose Sioux were encamped nearby, had any intention of allowing the old man of the thunder to bring his soldiers near their unprotected villages. Gathering about 300 warriors, Roman Nose and Pawnee Killer led them out to scout the approaching column. All around their villages they set fire to prairie grass so the soldiers would not find it easy to camp nearby. Now during the day, Pawnee Killer went ahead to meet the columns and parley with Hancock. He told the general that if the soldiers would not camp too near the villages, he and Roman Nose would meet him in council the next morning. About sundown, the soldiers halted to camp. They were still several miles from the lodges on Pawnee Fork, and this was the 13th of April, and the moon of the red grass appearing. And that night, Pawnee Killer and several of the Cheyenne chiefs left the soldier camp and went on to their villages to hold council and decide what they should do. And there was so much disagreement among the chiefs that nothing was accomplished. Roman Nose wanted to dismantle the teepees and start moving northward. Scatterings of the soldiers couldn't catch them, but the chiefs who had seen the power of Hancock's soldiers didn't want to provoke them to a merciless pursuit. And so the next morning, the chiefs tried to persuade Roman Nose to go with them to council with Hancock, but the warrior leaders suspected a trap. After all, had not the Old Man of Thunder singled him out? Had he not marched an army of soldiers across the plains in search of him, Roman Nose? And as the morning grew late, Bull Bear decided he had better ride to the soldier camp. He found Hancock in an arrogant mood, pretty standard for him, it seems, demanding to know where Roman Nose was. And Bull Bear tried to be diplomatic. He said Roman Nose and the other chiefs had been delayed by a buffalo hunt, but this only pissed off Hancock. He told Bull Bear he was going to march his troops up to the village and camp there until he saw Roman Nose. Bull Bear made no reply. He mounted casually, rode away at a slow pace for a few minutes, then galloped back to the village as fast as his horse would run. I've done that. I've turned my back on people threatening me and those around me, and I've turned my back slowly and sauntered away, taking my time to stop and look at the sun, but as soon as I got out of sight, run to go warn my compatriots. And so the news that the soldiers were coming stirred the Indian camp into immediate action. "I will ride out alone and kill this Hancock," Roman Nose shouted. There was no time to dismantle the lodges or pack anything. They put the women and children on ponies and sent them racing northward. Then all the warriors armed themselves with bows, lances, guns, knives, and clubs. The chiefs named Roman Nose their war leader, but they assigned Bull Bear to ride beside him to make sure that in his anger he didn't do anything stupid. So Roman Nose put on his officer's blouse with the gold epaulets, the blue coat, as shiny as Hancock's. He thrust a carbine into his dragoon's scabbard and 2 pistols into his belt, and because he had little ammunition, he added his bow and quiver. And at the last moment, he took along a truce flag, and he formed his force of 300 fighters into a line front extending a mile across the plain. With penanted lances up, bows strung, rifles and pistols at the ready, he led them out slowly to meet the 1,400 soldiers and their big thundering guns. "This officer they call Hancock," Roman Nose said to Bull Bear, "is spoiling for a fight. I will kill him in front of his own men and give them something to fight about." Bull Bear replied cautiously, pointing out that the soldiers outnumbered them almost 5-1. They were armed with fast-shooting rifles and big guns, and the soldiers' ponies were sleek and fat from grain, while their ponies and their women, their children were fleeing on, were weak after a winter without grass. If there was a fight, the soldiers could catch them and kill all of them. And so in a few minutes they saw the column coming, and they knew the soldiers had sighted them, because the troops formed into a line front. Hard backsides Custer deployed his cavalry for fighting, and they came into a line at a gallop with all their sabers drawn. Imagine that sight. Imagine being there on the hillside, viewing what was going on. Imagine being in that line of Indians. Imagine being in that cavalry. Pretty cocky that you're going to take them all. So Roman Nose calmly signaled his warriors to halt. He raised his truce flag, and at this the soldiers slowed their pace. They moved up to about 150 yards of the Indians and also halted. A high wind made the flags and pennants snap along both lines, and after a minute or so the Indians saw tall Chief Wynkoop riding forward alone. "They surrounded my horse," Wynkoop said afterward, expressing their delight at seeing me there, saying that now they knew everything was all right because he was there. They trusted Wynkoop. Remember, Wynkoop was that captain who earlier, we talked about him a few days ago, said that he was very hardened against the Native Americans until he rode back with 2 Native Americans to the camp, and he said he found them to be superior human beings, and that they were They had character and they had integrity such as he had never known or been told that the Native Americans had, or the Indians had, and he turned his whole state of mind about them at that point. And so he said that now the Indians knew everything was all right because Wynkoop was there and that they would not be harmed. I conducted the principal men and met General Hancock with his officers and their staffs nearly midway between the two lines. Now Roman Nose drew up near the officers. He sat on his horse facing the old man of the thunder and looked him straight in the eyes. "Do you want peace or war?" Hancock asked sharply. It's the first words out of Hancock's mouth. "You want peace or war?" He says to this man he's been waiting to meet, waiting to come in to see his superior forces. Roman Nose. "We do not want war," Roman Nose replied. "If we did, we would not come so close to your big guns." "Why did you not come to the council at Fort Larned?" Hancock continued. "My horses are poor," Roman Nose answered, "and every man that comes to me tells me a different tale about your intentions." Tall Bull, Graybeard, and Bull Bear had gathered close by. They were worried because Roman Nose was acting so calmly. Bull Bear spoke, asking the general not to bring his soldiers any nearer the Indian camp. "We've not been able to hold our women and children," he said. "They are frightened and have run away, and they will not come back. They fear the soldiers." "You must get them back," Hancock ordered harshly, "and I expect you to do so." What's up Hancock's ass right now is what I want to know. Why does he want all those women and children in the camp? "Get 'em back," he said. Well, they've already run off. They've fled. When Bull Bear turned away with a gesture of frustration, Roman Nose spoke softly to him, telling him to take the chiefs back to the Indian line. "I'm going to kill Hancock," he said. Bull Bear grabbed the bridle of Roman Nose's horse and led him aside, warning him that this would surely bring death to the whole tribe. The wind had increased, blowing sand and making conversation difficult, and after ordering the chiefs to start out immediately to bring back their women and children, Hancock announced that the council was ended. And that's where we have to end for tonight. So folks, you sit tight for 23 hours? No, 2 days. We won't be back till Sunday morning with It's Sunday and Monday to finish this story. Thanks for being here. Have a good night.